Diabetes Connections is brought to you by One Drop, created for people with diabetes by people who have diabetes, by Real Good Foods, real food you feel good about eating, and by Dexcom. Take control of your diabetes and live life to the fullest with Dexcom.
This is Diabetes Connections with Stacey Simms.
This week, Jeanne Martin was diagnosed with type 1 at age 10, back in 1955. She's had to fight a lot of doctors along the way, including one who told her she would not live to see her child grow up.
And my reaction was, I told my husband, that guy can go walk out in the street and get hit by a bus tomorrow. I'm not going to go along with that. That was my reaction. I got mad. I didn't buy into it. I didn't get depressed because I just thought he was full of baloney.
Jeanne was right. She's now a grandmother, and she shares what she's learned along the way that made her question and stand up to doctors like that. We're also joined by her daughter, Jessica, who shares what it's like growing up with a parent who has type 1. In Innovations this week, why a diabetes educator says invest in rubber bands. This podcast is not intended as medical advice. If you have those kinds of questions, please contact your healthcare provider. Welcome to another week of Diabetes Connections. I am so glad to have you here. I am your host, Stacey Simms, and we aim to educate and inspire about type 1 diabetes by sharing stories of connection. My son was diagnosed with type 1 right before he turned 2. That was back in 2006. My husband lives with type 2 diabetes. I don't have diabetes. I have a background in broadcasting, and that is how you get this show. I spent 20 plus years in local television and radio news. I've been doing this show for more than 5 years now, and I don't remember ever putting the topic of the show to a vote, but I did that for this week. I put up a poll in our Facebook group. It's Diabetes Connections, the group. I have a couple of interviews. I'm usually a few weeks ahead with interviews in the can. And I asked the group to vote on which interview they wanted to hear next, and everybody chose Jeanne. I cannot say I blame you. I am always amazed at the strength of these people, the stories of people who are living well with diabetes for 50, 60, 70 years. I mean, you think about it. Before blood glucose meters were a thing, I mean, they weren't available till the 1980s. And this was a time that we're talking about with Jeanne before some doctors would even know about different types of diabetes. I was shocked to learn that for a very long time, it was just diabetes and you treated it with 1 shot a day. Or then they would say juvenile diabetes, and you couldn't possibly have that if you were an adult, and just on and on. And if you're new to the show, I've done several interviews with people who were diagnosed in the 50s, in the 40s, and they've lived with type 1 for 70 years. And I will link those up with this episode. You can also search. We have a very good search engine at diabetes-connections.com. We're up to more than 320 episodes. So if you want to Google keywords like living long or 60 years with diabetes, that sort of thing, you can find that on the website. Before I get to the interview, I want to read something that was sent to me. It's actually a review on Apple Podcasts. I'm really bad at asking for reviews and keeping up with reviews. If you want to leave one, oh man, I would love it. Whatever podcast app you listen on, there is a way to leave a rating or review. This one came in from Shelly. Now, her name is not on this, but I know who this is because we featured her. We featured her son in a recent show. So Shelly wrote, I love this podcast so much. I learned so much from listening, especially enjoy the tech episodes with Dexcom and Tandem, etc. As the mom of a newly diagnosed 4-year-old, I have found much needed encouragement and tips for helping my son thrive with diabetes. Also, Cannon was excited to hear you mention him swimming in the lake. Shelly, thank you for writing that. Yeah, we talked about Cannon. She had sent a picture into the Facebook group about him burning off the glucose, she said, swimming in the lake. Man, swimming is one of those ways where Benny used to just, little kids just swim with every part of their body. He used to go low all the time in the pool. It's a little bit different now. A 15-year-old does not swim like a 4-year-old. But Shelly, thanks for sending that review in. It's always nice to get reviews like that. And if you like the show, truly the best thing to do is to tell somebody about it. Tell somebody in the diabetes community. That's the best way to get the word out. All right, Jeanne and her story in just a moment. But first, Diabetes Connections is brought to you by One Drop. And getting diabetes supplies is a pain. Not only the ordering and the picking up, but also the arguing with insurance over what they say you need and what you really need. Make it easy with One Drop. They offer personalized test strip plans, plus you get a Bluetooth glucose meter, test strips, lancets, and your own certified diabetes coach. Subscribe today to get the test strips for less than $20 a month. delivered right to your door. No prescriptions or copays required. One less thing to worry about. Not that surprising when you learn that the founder of OneDrop lives with type 1. They get it. OneDrop, gorgeous gear, supplies delivered to your door, 24/7 access to your certified diabetes coach. Learn more, go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the OneDrop logo. I feel like I've known Jeanne Martin for as long as my sons had diabetes. That's almost 14 years. And that's because, while I have never met Jeanne in person, I have been friends with her daughter, Jessica Graham, for even longer than those 14 years. We met when Jessica was in public relations here in Charlotte, and I was working as a health reporter for a local TV station. And later, we were on the board of our local JDRF chapter together. I cannot believe it has taken me this long to share Jeanne's story. She is just incredible. I was able to talk to Jeanne and Jessica about living well with type 1 for 66 years. Jeanne and Jessica, thank you so much for joining me. I've known Jessica for so long, but I don't know so much of this story. I'm so excited to talk to you both. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having us.
You're very welcome.
Jeanne, I got to start with you because you have lived with type 1 diabetes now for more than 65 years. Let me just start out by saying, how are you? How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great. I think I'm doing just fine.
Do you mind if I ask what technology you use, how you manage, anything you'd like to share?
Well, I check my blood sugar with little contour test strips, and I I take shots.
You can say it. We're all T1D friends here.
Yeah, I shoot myself 4 times a day. I see my doctor every 6 months. Well, that's about it.
She does not use a pump or any of that.
No.
If you don't mind, let's go back. Do you remember what it was like when you were diagnosed? You were 10 years old. Do you remember anything about that time?
Oh, yes, I do very much. We lived in a very small town, not far from the Mayo Clinic. We had just lived there a couple years. My friend's mother mentioned to my mother that I was drinking a lot of water and going to the bathroom a lot, and she thought maybe my mother should have me checked out. So we did, and the small town with the doctor there said, well, she's either got diabetes or TB. Well, I didn't know what diabetes was, and I knew what TB was, so I thought, oh, please I don't want TB. I'll have the other. And so the little, basically country doctor didn't know what to do. So anyway, so they sent me to St. Mary's, which is a part of the Mayo Clinic. And they tested me, and for sure that's what I had. So I had to stay there. I think it was 5 years. I had to do all this stuff with the diets, and they wouldn't let me leave until I could give myself a shot. But I was active, and I don't remember too much about it. The doctor were very nice, and everybody was very helpful. And back then, you had glass syringes and needles, and you couldn't check your blood sugar. You had to pee on a stick, and they sent me home, and my mother had to weigh everything, and I had to watch what I ate. But other than that, that's about it. Then I just basically went on with my life.
Did you really, were you able to jump back in, go to school, do all the things you wanted to do at that time?
Yeah, I did. Mm-hmm.
It seems like such a different time, right? I'm just trying to think.
It was a very different time. And when I first got married, I remember I had to boil my syringe once a week. We had to do that. And I was still peeing on a stick. And I only had 1 shot a day back then, all through, school. And, of course, I didn't want to tell my friends when I was in high school that's what I had. But, of course, my mother told my best friend's mother. So everybody knew it, but I didn't know they knew it. So,
oh, wow.
Anyway.
Moms are sneaky that way. But you said the regimen was so different. You had 1 shot a day.
Right.
And then you had to kind of eat around that shot. Did you have problems as a teenager? Do you remember, any issues, or were you able to I would assume by routine and by figuring out what to eat, how did it work out for you?
Well, I didn't run into any problems when I was a teenager. And I do remember, I don't know how, we would go not very often, my friends and I would have hot fudge sundaes, if you can believe it. But other than being bad like that, I lived at home, and my mother kind of watch what I ate, and I didn't eat a lot of sweets. You know, it was my mother's management, not mine. And I came home for lunch all during school, and I didn't start taking more shots until about, I don't know, maybe 40 years ago.
Yeah, it's so different to think about because we're talking about, I mean, if I'm doing my math correctly, you were diagnosed right in the early 50s, 1950s?
Right, 1955.
Yeah, so the routine was completely different. I mean, as you're listening, you got to understand, not only one shot a day, but no blood sugar home meters, right? You were still checking. How often did you check? And by check, we mean pee on a stick or in the chemicals. Yeah.
I probably did it maybe once a day. I honestly don't remember, but not a lot. It's very different now. And somehow I think my pancreas has always worked a little bit because I don't take much insulin, and I'm very, I don't want to say touchy with it, but I don't have to take a lot. And when I was diagnosed at the Mayo Clinic, they said that, yes, my pancreas was working a little bit. That's what they thought. And I still think that's the case because I just don't need much insulin. And I watch what I eat. I do, but, I'm not 100%. I mean, I do have cookies.
Well, you already told us you were eating hot fudge sundae, so the cat's out of the bag.
Well, I don't do that. That was in my youth. I do take care of myself now. I check myself 4 times a day, shoot up 4 times a day, and I watch myself better now because I know better. I'm more wiser.
Yeah. I'm curious, too, growing up, did you know anybody with type 1 diabetes? And if not, when did you meet somebody with type 1?
No, I never knew anybody. I didn't know anybody with any kind of diabetes. It wasn't in my family, so none of my relatives had it. No, during high school, I did not know. As an adult, I have met very few type 1 diabetics. I know they're out there, but very few. And it's kind of fun when I do, just to kind of say, well, compare notes, so to speak.
Sure. Jessica, let me ask you a couple of questions because the perspective of a kid, we're all adults now, but a child growing up with type 1 in the house and the type 1 is in the parent is not something that I've talked a lot about on the podcast. What's your earliest memory of your mom and diabetes?
Well, I don't ever remember it not being there. And that was more because I worried about her than it was her. There was never literally, and I mean this literally, there was never a day when my mom said, oh, I don't feel well, or, oh, my sugar's off, or I just don't feel good today. Never. And so it was nothing that she did. I just knew that if mom started acting funny, I needed to get the orange juice. So I remember that. I never had a problem with shots, and I think that's because I always saw you give yourself shots. So it was always there. The other thing that I remember is that I was always told that it skipped generations. So I do remember, I don't even know if you remember this, but I remember at one point when I was little, I told mom that I didn't want to have kids until there was a cure because I didn't want my kid to have type 1. And she got really mad. My mom never got mad, but she got upset at that and told me that was absolutely, the wrong attitude to have and that she had a great life and it didn't have any impact. And so that was the end of that. But it was just always there. So just always a part of life.
Jeannie, I'd love to hear your perspective on when Jessica, who now has I want to say a teenage son?
Yes.
Oh my
just
God.
turned 13. Yes.
Wow. I want to hear your reaction, Jeannie, to when she said, nah, I think we'll skip it. Right back to Jeannie answering that question. But first, Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Real Good Foods. True story from my house. Benny came downstairs the other night, opened the freezer door, looked in it, closed the door, and said, who ate the mint chocolate chip ice cream? And I had to say, it was me. I finished it off. Sorry, Benny. But the Real Good Foods ice cream is really good. We had a vanilla, chocolate, and mint chip this last time. I promised him I would buy more, and I have to get the peanut butter kind as well. We haven't found the ice cream yet in our grocery store freezer, so I get that online. But our grocery store carries a lot of the meals, and they are so good and super easy. You basically just heat them up if you have an air fryer. It's even better. They have everything from pizza to breakfast sandwiches to bowls, these new bowl meals that are really nice entrees. Find out more. Check out that mint chocolate chip ice cream for yourself. It stays frozen. They package it up the right way. I was worried about that, but no need to worry. Should have known. Just go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Real Good Foods logo. Now back to Jeanne answering my question about her reaction when Jessica told her she was really concerned about having children.
Well, I didn't want her to dwell on it, and I didn't want her not to have kids. You know, it's so much more advanced nowadays, and there's so much more that they can do. And I always do hope for a cure. I mean, I've been hanging on that for a long time, but you never know. One of these days, no matter what your problem is, you just have to get along and do the best you can and get along with your life and not dwell on it. And I've never dwelled on it.
Well, and I'm curious, too, because now we know, and I've heard that, too, it skips generations. We know it absolutely does not. But I'm curious, Jeanne, you know, when you decided that you wanted to have children, did anybody try to talk you out of it? This was a very different time for diabetes.
Well, I was told that I would have a hard time having a child. And so we put up for adoption. And we were waiting to hear. And I went to the doctor and thought I had a tumor, but the tumor was Jessica.
Oh, my God.
So I thought, okay, so we said, you know, we're going to have a baby, so we don't need to adopt. And they said, well, why don't you wait to see if everything is okay? And I said, okay, because the doctors told me that Jessica only had a 40% chance of being born alive. So we waited, and she was screaming and kicking, so she was fine. So we stopped the adoption because we didn't need two babies at one time. And I didn't see her for, I think it was like 2 or 3 days. She was in an incubator because her blood sugar was low when she was born. But then after that, she was fine and I was fine. And that's it.
I'm sorry, I'm still on the tumor.
Well, and I'll add to that because, you know, she won't tell you this part, but because she was diabetic, she couldn't have any medicine or painkillers when I was born. And you were in labor, 24 hours?
No. It was, I don't remember, 13 hours, something like that. It was
ridiculously long. And I was stuck behind a piece of cartilage. And so I wasn't coming out. So she went through hell delivering me. But it all worked out.
Yep, all worked out.
Things really have changed. I mean, that's unbelievable.
Yeah. Oh, yes. And I also was told I would not live to see my child grow up. And now I've got a 13-year-old grandson.
Amazing. But let's talk about that, because I've heard that from so many people diagnosed not only in the 50s, but even as late as like the 70s and 80s, this doomsday of you're not going to live past 30. And I know that for many people that unfortunately was the case. There was not the care. There was not, whatever they needed. But it seems as though in some ways the doctors, I don't know, I don't want to editorialize here, but they seem to have this doomsday approach. And when you were told that, Jeanne, what was your reaction? I mean, I think a lot of people would have said, well, what's the point?
Oh, I'm kind of stubborn. and my reaction was, I told my husband, that guy can go walk out in the street and get hit by a bus.
Nice.
And tomorrow. And I'm not going to go along with that. That was my reaction. I got mad. And he did die at a younger age than I am now, as a matter of fact, the guy that told me that. I didn't buy into it. I didn't get depressed because I just thought he was full of baloney.
I love it. All right, this is getting interesting now. I do love it. Jessica, I know your mom is sitting right there, but you're doing great, Jeanne, obviously with your shots and with your checking, but the technology has advanced. I'm going to assume, Jessica, that you guys have had a lot of discussions about this, and your mom has said no, and you're respecting that. Don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm curious, how have those conversations happened?
Oh, yes. And I don't mind saying it with her sitting right here. So I don't mind that she doesn't do the pump, because I understand. I mean, she's had incredible control for 60 some years. And so I don't blame her that, but I want her to have a blood sugar monitor, because she tends to go low, and she goes low at night. And it's been a problem. I call it a problem. Whenever she goes low, to me, it's a problem. And so while she keeps great control, and it's her life, right? And it's her decision to make, I wish that she would get some of that electronic help with the monitoring of it. So yeah, we have that conversation a lot, but I lose. So.
Well, and it's a difficult situation. We as parents of children with type 1 have these conversations, especially once they're a certain age. And I'm going to say as young as 4 or 5 years old, where it really has to be up to the person to buy into it and say, yes, I want this technology. And I would imagine, and I'm just imagining having this conversation with my mother, who I think has a lot in common with Jeannie. And I don't think it would go that well.
Stubborn.
Yeah, well, stubborn, but also you're doing very well.
Yeah, and that's why, at the end of the day, what am I going to do, right? I can only put in my 2 cents. But that is the one thing that I wish she would do. And my dad, to his credit, he's kind of grown up with this too, right? And so he's a great monitor, strangely. He knows when it's the middle of the night and she's having a hard time. But I don't like to rely on that. But again, I lose. So she is stubborn.
Well, but let me cut in here. But the doctor prescribed a new kind of insulin that I've been taking, 6 months now, and I have not had any trouble at night.
Oh, good.
What are you taking? We don't have to use it in the show. Are you taking Tresiba?
It's Tresiba. Yeah, and I have not had any trouble at night since I've been on that.
Yeah,
that's a good thing.
Yeah. My son uses an insulin pump, but long story short, we had him on Tresiba with the pump for a while because teenagers use the most ungodly amount of insulin that you could imagine.
Well,
and
sure.
He's coming out of it, so we did away with the Tresiba, but boy, it's like the best long-acting we've ever used. I'm curious, too, and we're kind of skipping around chronologically here, but I mentioned earlier that there were not blood sugar meters for home use when you were diagnosed. Do you remember when you started using one of those, maybe in the 80s?
Well, I thought it was great because then I really knew what was going on. It was very helpful and that's why I check myself a lot, because you can't guess how much insulin. You can guess kind of how much insulin, but you really can't without knowing what your blood sugar is, to my mind. I think that's what's helped me keep control. And yeah, I don't like to stick my fingers, but I'm so used to it now, it just comes secondhand to me. So it made a big difference. What really made a big difference too is having plastic syringes that you don't have to boil.
Tell me more about that. When did that switch? Not necessarily like what year, but tell me more about that. What do you remember kind of the transition? Did you just one day throw all the glass ones out, or what happened?
Right. Yeah, I did. I guess the doctor told me that these were available, and so I bought them and used them, and then you use it and throw it out, and it just it made a big difference. It just like, oh gosh, this is getting easier, and it was a lot easier. it sounds like a small thing, but it was a pain to boil, syringes once a week and needles once a week. And so this was great.
When did you? I don't remember you ever boiling. Was that in the 60s or 70s?
No. Well, I don't think when you were born that I must have used the plastic ones. Yeah. Because I don't remember doing that either when you were born.
Jeannie, it's interesting. You said it seems like a little thing. I think for someone who has my perspective, my son was diagnosed in 2006 when we basically have all of the technology. At least it was on the drawing board, if not available at the time. It wasn't as good as it is now, just 13, 14 years later, but it was there. And so to think about transitioning from peeing on a stick to a blood sugar meter, glass syringes to plastic syringes, these are monumental changes. I don't think it was a little thing. I can't imagine how much of a difference that made. The needles had to even feel different. They were more comfortable, I assume.
Oh, well, it was like one size needle with the glass syringes, and they weren't that small. And now, you can get all different kinds of sizes.
Jessica, do you remember growing up? It sounds like your mom's diabetes was not front and center, as I'm sure she would not have wanted it. But are there any things that stand out, when you were a teenager? I'm trying to think, because parents are just super embarrassing to begin with.
Honestly, no, because my mom wouldn't let it be the center. You're absolutely right about that. She would never have wanted that. And I don't remember there being anything that happened when I was a teenager that was odd. She had one episode, I guess I was a teenager when you broke your ankle. We discovered that she couldn't drink champagne.
Oh.
She had a glass of champagne, literally a glass, and the next morning passed out and broke her ankle because it messed up her blood sugar so badly. But I don't remember anything ever embarrassing or weird or no, not at all. Again, I remember when I was a younger teenager, like if you started acting strangely, I needed to get you orange juice. Like I vaguely remember that, and that went for anybody. Like I think if anybody started acting strangely, I would have handed them orange juice, but no.
Jeanne, did you have a career? Did you work? Did you work at home? Tell me a little bit about what you did.
I worked during high school. I worked at clothing stores and I worked at a bakery. And then after school, I worked at a real estate office. And I guess that was it because it was the board of realtors because I had to quit then when I got pregnant with Jessica. So that was it. And then when my husband started his company, I worked for him. I did the payroll and a few things like that.
Jessica, what led you to JDRF? I mean, we had met previous to that, but we connected again at the Charlotte chapter.
I led community outreach for Harris Teeter, but didn't formally get involved. They were supportive of JDRF, but didn't formally get involved in a board capacity until I got to Time Warner Cable. They were also involved with JDRF, and so I joined the board at that point and was on the board for, 6 or 7 years, I think, and chaired it in there. But I think I knew about JDRF through Mom. Like, I think you just always supported them.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, the organization was born the year I was born. Just another thing that had always been a part of my life. And I was really excited to get involved with the chapter because, as you sort of already mentioned, the parents of type 1 diabetics are really involved. But there really aren't many children of type 1s out there, or there weren't at the time. It meant a lot to me to be involved and to be part of it.
I'm just curious, your mom, Jeanne, you just seem so laid back. And I've talked to several people who have lived with diabetes for this long who are, I don't want to say relaxed, because obviously you're not, but who are more of the, hey, I'm taking care of it. We don't need to talk about it. I'm not surrounded by people with type 1. And then there are people who are younger or who have been diagnosed more recently who are really a big part of that community and want and need to kind of breathe that air. And I was curious, Jessica, was it surprising for you to kind of be involved in JDRF and be around people who were more like, well, I am talking about it every day and I am going to tell you more about it?
Yeah, it was definitely different because that's just not how it was in my house. It wasn't a big secret or anything, but Mom definitely didn't advertise it, and it certainly wasn't part of her identity. It was very, very different. I really loved to, be involved, but I really loved getting my mom in that community. Like I would take her to the gala and that kind of thing. And she really is such an inspiration to a lot of people, especially those who are newly diagnosed, because they can see somebody who really, has had a full, long, wonderful life with it. And so it's not this doomsday message. And so she's really, I think, a real inspiration for that. And I think, too, she's a great inspiration for how important attitude is and outlook is, because she's never let it define her and she's never let it limit her. And I think she's really inspirational. So, yes, it was very different to be around different people with it. But also it was really exciting to be able to share her with that community.
Jeanne, what's your reaction to have your daughter sitting next to you and saying what an inspiration she thinks you are?
Well, I think that's very nice. It's very complimentary. I never thought of myself that way, but I'm glad she sees me that way.
All right, I know my listeners are going to want to know a few more little details. Jeanne, do you exercise a lot? Have you always been active? Are you more kind of laid back about that too? That's one of the things that people always ask me about.
No, I say I'm pretty active. Well, since we've lived here almost the whole time, I would go to the Y 3 days a week. Don't do that now because it's closed. And when I was younger, I played golf and did a little bit of tennis. I've always gardened. Well, not always, but for a long time, went out in the in the yard, dug in the dirt and that type of thing. And I try to walk about a mile a day. I mean, I walk more, but I go for a mile walk or more. I try to do it every day unless it rains. I do it early when it's hot because the heat affects my blood sugar. I run into trouble easier, and I don't know if that's the same with other people, but anyway, that's the way it is. But yeah, I think I'm pretty active.
Yeah, I think you're very active.
Jessica, I'm curious, you mentioned that you were worried about your son having type 1. He's 13 now. Do you still think about that as in the back of your mind? Is it something that you've ever had checked out? Anything like that?
Yes. So I worry about it every day.
Really?
But I try not to think about it, and I certainly have never mentioned it. We had it checked once, and I forget why. You've checked it.
Yeah, I checked it.
Maybe you were the one. Anyway, I feel like I had it checked once, and I don't remember why. Maybe he was thirsty that day. But I do worry about it a lot. And I mean, literally every time he says I'm thirsty, because I'm just a little neurotic that way. But I don't talk about it at all. Like he would have no idea. And I don't think anybody would know that. But yeah, I worry about it a lot. But then again, I think, well, if he ever were to develop it, my gosh, he has the world's greatest teacher to help him navigate it. So that puts my mind at ease. When he was very, very small, I found tests that he could have done. It might have even been when he was born. I mean, he was really, really young. And I think it was down in Florida.
Yeah, you're talking about TrialNet.
Yes, that must be what it was. And we just decided not to do that. And I think I talked to you about it and talked to my mom about it. And she, I think, suggested that we not do it. And I decided not to. So.
Well, and Jeanne, let me then ask you about that, because you would, as Jessica said, he would have such a great role model and teacher. God forbid something would happen like that. So let me just ask you, what would your advice be for a newly diagnosed adult or a newly diagnosed family for facing something like this now in 2020?
Well, it depends the age of the kid. I think when you're a teenager, I think it'd be harder on the kid because, you don't want to be. And maybe it's because I'm a girl and maybe it's back then. You don't want to be different. I mean, you want to blend in. As a teenager, you don't really have enough self-confidence to say, okay, I've got this and I'm going to deal with it. I mean, I'm not saying that kids don't, but I would think that's a harder age. But I guess I would just be very positive in all the things that can help. At the same time, would be his responsibility to see that he does try to do what he should do with diet and exercise and taking his medicine. I have a niece who came down with it when she was 10, and she never did well with it. She didn't do what she was supposed to do. And over the years, she's had all kinds of complications. And she just got very depressed with it. And you have to be positive. But the kid himself has to take responsibility for himself to do what he should do. And I strongly believe in that.
Thank you both so much for joining me today. It was amazing to learn about your story, Jeanne. And I'm so glad, Jessica, that we were able to do this. Thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you. It was nice meeting you via the computer.
You're listening to Diabetes Connections with Stacey Simms.
I shared some photos in the Facebook group that Jeanne and Jessica sent me. I was so happy to finally get a chance to talk to her. And you know what? After that interview, she sent me an email with some advice for Benny, which I thought was really, really nice. Now, he is, as you've heard him here on the show, he's a little too confident, but he's very independent and very confident. But Jeanne had some really nice words just about, not letting diabetes stop you and keeping a good attitude that has served her well. And I really appreciate that she took the time to do that. This community is just great. All right, Innovations is up next, and we have a very low-tech solution to a very scary problem. It has to do with rubber bands. All right, I'll explain that in just a moment. Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Dexcom, and we started with Dexcom back in the olden days before Share. So trust me when I say using share and follow apps make a big difference. I meet a lot of people who don't realize that when Dexcom launched, you could not see numbers not only on your phone, but you could not share them with anybody else. But now it's such a great system. And Benny and I set parameters about when I'm going to text him or, how long to wait, all that. It helps us talk and worry about diabetes less when he is at a sleepover or goes on a trip. It gives me peace of mind. It also helps if I need to troubleshoot with him because I can see what's happening over the last 24 hours and not just at one moment. The alerts and alarms that we set help us from keeping the highs from getting too high and help us jump on lows before they're a big issue. Internet connectivity is required to access separate Dexcom Follow app. To learn more, go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Dexcom logo. As you know, I am the queen of diabetes mistakes. I wrote a whole book about why I think mistakes are great. It's the world's worst diabetes mom, real life stories of raising a child with type 1. But I will say that making mistakes is also incredibly scary at times. And the one mistake that I think almost everybody with type 1 or who's a caregiver for someone with type 1 has made is mixing up the long-acting and the short-acting. When you're on MDI, whether it's the beginning or you've been doing this for a while, I'm in enough Facebook groups where I see this happening. It's once in a blue moon for the individual, but it seems like almost every week somebody's coming in and saying, oh my gosh, I did this. I'm so scared. What do I do? Right? Well, one of the best tips I ever heard on is so simple. And I heard it from a CDE and I'm so embarrassed that I don't know their name. And I'm so sorry. If this was you, email me, Stacey@diabetes-connections.com, and I will give you credit. But what you do is this. Whenever you have a new vial or a new pen of long-acting, and do this on the long-acting only, take a rubber band and wrap it around the pen or the vial. Just wrap it around a couple times, make sure it's not loose, it's not sliding around. And then every time you pick up your long-acting, you will know that it feels different. It's got those rubber band bumps on it. And if you do this often enough, really it doesn't take that long, maybe 2 weeks, your fingers will start to associate that feel with the long acting. So if you make a mistake, if you accidentally grab the wrong pen, your hand and your brain will instinctively know that something is wrong. Now, this is not proven. I haven't seen any studies on it, but this is advice that was given to me that I've heard other people use, and it really does make sense. It is incredible that after all this time with different kinds of insulin, that the pens are pretty much exactly the same. The Atlantis vial, I remember, might be a little skinnier, right? It looks a little bit different. But when you're moving quickly and automated like a lot of us are, I could do that tandem cartridge in my sleep. Whereas when we first got it, I thought, oh my God, this is so complicated. I've got to lay everything out on the table. We did the Animus pump for 10 years. I could definitely fill that thing blindfolded. You just get used to your routine and how things feel. So if you just wrap the rubber band around the long acting, you will get used to the feel of it. Let me know what you think. Does that make sense to you? Has anybody tried that? And if you've got an innovation like that, this segment is for everything big and small that makes living with type 1 just a little bit easier. Let me know. I would love to hear from you. Just a little personal update before I let you go. This has to do with insurance. We've had some employment situation changes around my house, which means I have already spent far too much time on the phone. I decided to start taking advice from one of our previous guests, from Melissa Lee, who said when you have insurance issues, you should start with the diabetes companies and work backward. So I called Dexcom and Tandem and I said, hello, I have changed insurance. What do I need to do? And they were very helpful. The bad news is my new insurance means we have to order from a third-party supplier, and it's EdgePark. EdgePark, if you were listening, please handle this well. We were with EdgePark years ago, and I hate to disparage anybody, but let's turn this into a positive. I felt that it was such a gift for the last 5.5 years to order directly from Tandem and directly from Dexcom, and I am sad to see those days in my rearview mirror. So I will keep you posted on how it goes. I am currently, as I'm recording, in the limbo of an EdgePark representative will get back to you. We have plenty of supplies. I have a great support system if I need anything, so I'm not worried about Benny. But man, although I'm a liar because I did say to him, before you rip anything off your body, it's so bad, before you take off that sensor or that inset, come talk to me and make sure that it's okay to do so. Isn't that terrible? I'm laughing because we really are fine, but it just makes me crazy how expensive this stuff is and how ridiculous the process is to order what you need. So I will keep you posted on that. Hopefully it'll all go smoothly, but this is not my first rodeo, so I'm anticipating navigating a not so smooth road. I'll let you know. Thank you so much to my editor, John Buchanan from Audio Editing Solutions. Thank you all so much as you listen. I'm Stacey Simms. I'll see you back here next week. Until then, be kind to yourself.
Diabetes Connections is a production of Stacey Simms Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.